Hello everyone and welcome to Don't Be Bored. Today I'm joined by Chris, the designer of Around the World in 10 to 15 minutes. It's a print and play game with that travel theme, and hopefully it's going to take you a little less than 80 days to get around. So welcome Chris, welcome to the channel. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the game.
Hey there, yep, I'm Chris Backe. I am the designer of Around the World in 10 to 15 minutes. This is our third game coming out from No Box Games, and it is an action selection game with a leader-follower mechanic. So basically, each turn, one player is going to be the navigator, and they're going to choose whether they want to travel, just to go to a different place on the map, if they want to explore the city they're in, to do some set collecting type things, or if they want to get souvenirs, which will let you fill your luggage and potentially fill the rows and columns in your luggage.
That split between the navigator and the followers sounds like a really interesting one. Could you elaborate a little bit about how those choices as the navigator affect others, and how does that work in a solo game?
So basically, in the solo mode, you're just going to roll 2d6, and your total indicates the two actions you get to do that turn, and you get to choose in what order you do them. So, for example, when you roll a 6, a total of 6 on the two dice, you'll travel and explore, and you'll get to do those two actions in either order you like. If you roll a 5, a 5 or a 9 is your choice. You can take any two actions you want. Um, and if you roll a 10, you can do a souvenir and explore. And it's balanced to give you about an equal number of chances to do the different things. So the main choice is not in your hands, but you choose how you do the thing, what order you do them. So you'll feel clever because there's lots of ways to do this, and the dice probabilities are set up such that there's a good chance that you'll be able to do something you want every turn.
The game is all themed around travelling around the world. When did that sort of theme come about in the development? And, well, what's the best souvenir that you've ever got?
So the game's always been about travel. And a lot of times designers will ask, oh, do you start from theme or do you start from mechanics? And simple answer is I start from both, but I also start from sometimes title. So one of the games I'm working on is called Downward Facing Panda. And if you know anything about yoga, you've heard the term downward facing dog. And one day I thought, let's just change out dog for some other animal. And panda was the first one that came to mind because I had just been watching Kung Fu Panda. And so from that title, Downward Facing Panda, it gave me the theme of the game. What are you doing? You're a panda doing yoga. And so from there, you get a bit of the mechanics in play as well, because a game where you're a panda doing yoga isn't really a heavy Euro take that sort of game. It's going to be pretty calm, pretty peaceful, and the game kind of developed from there. So with this game, Around the World in 10 to 15 minutes, I had obviously I was a fan of Jules Verne's classic book, Around the World in 80 Days, and I was thinking about how you might subvert expectations with that. So what else can you do? Change the time period. So Around the World in 10 to 15 minutes tells you ideally what you're looking to uh, do in the game and how long it's going to take. There's a bit of a promise that the game is making here. The weirdest souvenir, I've definitely seen a lot of weird like refrigerator magnets. I think we were in Italy where we saw some neon colored statues of the famous nude David statue. And I thought that's got to be just one of the weirdest souvenirs I've ever seen. That's not in the game, but definitely something I've seen in the real world that I thought was hilarious.
That's certainly a unique sounding souvenir. With the game having that time length of 10 to 15 minutes in the title, what did you do during development to make sure that it sort of hit that time consistently?
So the simple answer is 10 to 15 minutes. It feels like the perfect sort of filler length. And I know that from playtesting a lot, that regardless of the player count, the game ends about the same number of turns because there's only so many routes you can take to get around the world, and someone will usually have an incentive to get there earlier. There's a few bonus points if you're the one that actually gets home first. But what also happens is um, again, regardless of player count, the game takes a certain number of player turns. So um, making those choices simple and making it easy for everyone to execute was probably the most important thing, keeping the decisions simple. So whenever you have the opportunity to choose, more complex, more simple, I would put money on it. Simpler is better 99% of the time. It is far more difficult to make a game simpler than it is to make it more complex. So it's easy to add things on top of a system that already works, whether it's another layer or whether it's another band-aid. So what I'm frequently trying to do in games is to strip those layers back. What's a simpler way to explain this thing? What's a better way to accomplish this thing? I still want interesting decisions, and I still want players to feel like they can do this way or this way. There's valid reasons to do either of these two things. I want to push and pull the player in different ways. And even with that said, the strategic horizon, how far into the future you can see, is still fairly low. So, because you can't know where everyone's going to go on the next turn, you're limited by what you can see them wanting to do this turn. Maybe you can see a little bit further ahead, but so restricting the strategic horizon and reducing the number of choices to be interesting but not infinite is probably the best way to say it.
Sounds like you're striving for a really brilliant balance there, and I like that sort of thing. Now, No Box Games is all about print and play games. Did you find that actually that was a limitation at all when you were designing?
So I am one third of No Box Games. I will go ahead and take credit for the idea of the publishing company, and I brought on two amazing people to help make these games a reality. Um, when I first started No Box Games, I wanted to focus on, I think the biggest sort of hang up people had with print and play games. People liked the idea of their accessibility and their price, and it certainly made the process of getting games easier to people. But I often heard people buying the game and then never playing it because assembling a game took time, it took effort, it took materials, and maybe not everyone has all of the things that they need to do that. Certainly, if you're a crafter, um, printable games are a wonderful thing to craft, and that's a great thing to do with your time. But I wanted to get games into people's hands. So one of the first things we realized with that no assembly required promise was that this means no cards. So the process of creating information, holding information, tracking information changes completely when you take out cards. Um, so what it means is more of your play is on your sheet in front of you and is also on other players' sheets. Maybe there's a sheet in the middle of the table that does something, but the information is all public. Your intents remain private. Or maybe I can guess what you want to do, but I still have to kind of look at your sheet and make a guess. I can't know it for certain. So it is limiting, but that's actually a good thing in my mind because it reduces the scope of potential. You give someone a big blank piece of paper and that you say, make a game, and they go, how do I do that? There's so many things I can do, you know? So I come back to wanting some direction and giving myself goalposts. So in this game, it's 10 to 15 minutes long. It should be for ages 8 and up, and the player count we're saying is 1 to 6. You could play with more people with that the same sort of solo rule, the 2d6 solo rule. Those will be in the rules as well. But for the player count on the Kickstarter images, I was about to say on the box, um, on the images, it would just say 1 to 6. So it can be limiting, but it also can feel rewarding and clever when you, as the designer, create the cool thing that fits this requirement. You set it for yourself.
Many people do seem to sort of struggle when given unlimited choices, so that's a really good sort of idea to have those goalposts. Now, what would you give as a tip to a budding designer that's looking to make a print and play game?
So the simple answer is printable games are they're not easy to make. Um, if you're looking to get into a type of game to make, the first thing I would say is, yes, by all means, make a print-to-play game. It's a great restriction in terms of thinking about how to use people's basic common components. And it's also a great way to get your game out there in a relatively low barrier to entry. I would suggest really just understanding the board game industry means playing more games. Play big games, play small games, play good games, play bad games. You've heard this spiel before. If you want to make your own print-and-play game, play more print-and-play games. I would also recommend doing what you can to understand why people buy them as much as why people want to make them. Now, again, there is a low barrier to entry here. Anyone can put together a printable game and throw it on Kickstarter and find some backers that way. But the process of creating a printable game is very similar to creating a full-fledged board game. You're still trying to build a marketing community. You're still trying to market the game. You still need amazing artwork to stand out. And you still want to have you still want to present the best game you can. Just because it's a printable game, just because it's low barrier to entry is no excuse. Make the best freaking game you can, full stop. And if that happens to be a print and play version of the game, then great. If it happens to be if like you start making a printable game and it wants to become something else, let it grow. Sometimes you have a bigger game that wants to be pulled back to a smaller game. Let the game guide you where it wants to go. Sometimes the game is almost calling to you to say, hey, I want to be a bigger game. Let me get more pieces. Let it grow.
A great tip. Make a great game regardless. That's a really nice one. Now, where can people go to find out a bit more about the game?
So Around the World in 10 to 15 Minutes is going to be on Kickstarter in April 2024 going into May. You can learn all about the game at noboxgames.com. That's noboxgames.com, just like it sounds. And if you search Kickstarter for Around the World in 10 to 15 Minutes, you'll find it there as well.
And lastly, one for a bit of fun, what's the weirdest game in your collection?
So this is not the weirdest game personally, but this is certainly one of the weirder concepts I've seen. And part of this is because I don't really own a lot of board games. Like my shelf over here has a few published games on top there. But most of my calyx is actually the bits that I use for designing games. So I don't really have a lot of weird games to talk about. But the one that I'll go ahead and just show on camera while I'm thinking about it is going to be this one. This was Cluedo, and this is basically they tried to combine Cluedo or Clue with an escape room style game, and I thought it was a really cool idea done in kind of a weird way. I appreciate what they were trying to do, but the process of making Clue a mass market game and combine it with an escape room type experience means you have to do things. You have to keep things really simple, and that's okay because sometimes, again, as we were talking about, simple is better 99% of the time. I wish they'd added a little bit more depth to the game, and I wish they had made a couple more sort of branching paths. But yeah, it's not very weird. Sorry about that.
I might have to hunt that one down. It sounds like a really cool concept to me. Thank you very much, Chris, for coming on and answering the questions.
Thank you so much for offering me the opportunity.
As always with these interviews, links will be in the description box down below so you can go and find out more and, well, check out other interviews with other designers about their games here on the channel. And until next time, have a great day gaming.